Hey, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Event Marketers Toolbox. I got a couple of friends on. We've been chopping it up in the green room, and we're already smiling and having a good time. I'm Chris Dunn. I'm with Blue Hive Exhibits. We are here on the Event Marketers Toolbox. This is a community of like-minded event professionals we're building here. We are looking forward to hearing from you if you're in the audience and you've got some questions. This is a live show, as we normally do, so we'd love to have you weigh in. We've got a familiar guest. His name's Brendon Hamlin. He's from Asheville, North Carolina. Hamlin Creative. He's joining in as our guest podcast host. Hello, Brendon. How are you?
Hey, Chris. I am doing great. Happy to be here and on another episode. So I appreciate you continuing to ask me to participate.
And you keep coming back, which is
I know
fantastic.
I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm Brendon Hamlin. I run Hamlin Creative. We are based out of Asheville, North Carolina. We do a lot of work, video production work in and around events. So whether that's trade shows or conferences or activations, experiential live marketing. We love creating content within live marketing. And so we are super happy to have Emily Dilbeck with us today. So Emily, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you both for having me. My name is Emily Dilbeck, and I lead our global field marketing team over at Unbound. Unbound is a B2B demand generation agency. And so we're actually kind of going through this evolution now where we're layering in this brand to demand evolution. So we're kind of this full 360 marketing agency, which is really exciting. And I've pretty much spent my whole career in events. So I kind of started out in more of the creative experiential realm with working with a smaller creative studio and B2C brands. So primarily in the alcoholic beverage space. So that was a lot of fun. We did kind of experiment with some mocktails, but that was a few years ago. So definitely things have been transitioning. Have hopped around from a few places, and then here I found myself at Unbound. So really excited to be here with you guys today and kind of talk about what we're going to talk about.
We might talk about events or something like that. I don't know. I mean, it's in the name. We should probably address that. So, hey, some woman named Sarah Hamlin is checking in from Asheville, I believe.
Who?
Yeah. She's stalking you. She's actually off to the side of the camera. Your partner in crime, your wife, and your business partner.
Right.
So yeah, it's been awesome getting to know Brendon. As I find, or we find, a lot of our guests, it's folks that I come across on LinkedIn, and we get connected. We start having conversations. Emily, you're considerably younger than Brendon and I, but you bring an awful lot of great experience. So I'm always looking, in trying to pick apart or look into what's that conversation point look like? What are they talking about? And we've had I'm very grateful and blessed that we've met so many great people online who have a similar philosophy of how events can move the needle. Good stuff there. And before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the conversation, just a quick word from our sponsors, because without them, we would actually have no show. So I work for Blue Hive Exhibits. Blue Hive is a creative agency. We're 20 years old. We are located in the Boston area, and we also have a West Coast facility. We actually build and produce in both of our locations. So East Coast, West Coast. We like to think that we're in that right size area, right? Where boutiques are awesome and they're creative, but sometimes you need more resources and more firepower. We're about 100 people strong. And again, with those both locations, we can service, shows all over really North America and the world. But that we've got a ton of stuff happening on the West Coast, and we're really building a lot of momentum out there. And then on the agency side, the folks at Fist Bump are producing this show. I met Brandon Lee, the Brendan and Brandon, right? The owner of Fist Bump a few years back. We got connected. He started helping me kind of work on my LinkedIn game. It became, how do we help Blue Hive? And then it kind of bled into like, wouldn't it be great to produce a show? And I was like, yeah, I can do this ish. And I struggled, and I we were actually just talking about this with Emily, right? How do you get a podcast and a live show like this off the ground? Well, the answer is if you've got a small team, it's really, really hard. But when you partner with somebody like Fist Bump, they do all the heavy lift. So behind the scenes right now, we've got Juana who's helping us. These guys just take on the heavy load at Fist Bump, and they help us produce this content. We are now being found. AI searches are looking through blogs and transcripts and so forth, and we're being found more than ever. So there's so many benefits that kind of spin out of creating content like this, not to mention that we make a lot of friends and have great conversations. So that's a bit of a wrap on that. And then I'm going to kick it back to Brendon to start off with the questions, because we've got a great topic today. Emily kind of comes to the table and we're going to talk micro events, and specifically she's got a concept of a backyard party thinking. So Brendon, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, and I do. I love this. I love this topic today, because I think that there is some real energy in connecting, in making stronger connections. And so, Emily, I'd love for you to kind of tell us about this, maybe this philosophy of, the backyard party mentality, and how that translates into micro events, and how they're more impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that you touched on, Chris, is like AI. And so AI is very noisy. And so of course the world of like B2B marketing, the world of B2B events, it has gotten noisy as well. I feel like there's always another conference that is popping up. There's always another webinar, digital event, massive event that, is being pushed to your inbox, you're being invited to, someone's hitting you up on LinkedIn and your DMs and saying, hey, I have this really cool experience for you. Like, would you be interested? So I think that has just gotten more and more noisy. And, over time, I've realized, something that the biggest, flashiest events aren't the most impactful. I think that, the impact often happens in these like smaller, more intentional settings. And I think that's where my focus has definitely shifted, and my approach has shifted on designing these micro experiences that feel more like a night with your friends in the backyard, rather than some corporate, event where you feel like you're on, you feel like you're on, and not in the like on way that you want to be when you're at an event, right? Like you should be going to an event to kind of like unplug, relax, hopefully, digest some valuable content. That's what events are about. It's about connection, and then hopefully bringing some valuable content. So yeah, that's where I start.
Fantastic. So are you saying that fire pit, cooler full of beer, cornhole, like all those things, right? Like that's kind of, we're going to build those events with those wonderful components, maybe some s'mores.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, like don't knock it till you try it. I mean,
right? I
have heard of instances and examples where people have gotten really creative, and I think that that's one of the things too with kind of this backyard mentality thinking, is that it's really not about like going in and doing the most, and sometimes it's taking a look at B2C brands that are, engaging with customers on such a personal level, and kind of stealing some points from them. So, I have seen events where, people they set up in a field, they've got, different activations going on, and it is an amazing time.
I love, Emily, what you said on one of your posts recently, talking about AI and how AI is, and I kind of have the same mentality, that it's this tool that we're gonna use, but it's not gonna get to the heart. And I think that what you're talking about here is like, when you're in these small, when your guards let down a little bit, then you're able to open up and be a little more effective. And I think that's where micro events really can flourish, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that taps into, exactly why they work, right? It's
Yeah.
that concept of psychological safety. So when you get real, walls fall down, people open up, the trust is like built almost in lightning speed, like versus an event where you come in, you feel like you have to be on, you're, listening to a panel of something where you're just not necessarily aligned or engaged with the content, but you're like, well, I'm here, I was invited, and you leave kind of feeling like, well, my time wasn't valued or appreciated.
I guess one question I have real quick, just as it relates to sort of maybe the dynamic of a large event, how does it scale down to a small event? So like say for instance, a well-known keynote speaker, can something like that translate into a micro event?
Absolutely. Like I 100% yes. And I was just thinking about this the other day for an event. And, when you're thinking about a keynote speaker, like think about, a book launch or a book signing, right? Like
Right.
think about taking that, format into that format. So
Yeah.
you're taking the concept and just moving it into a different format. So you may be popping up at a local coffee shop. You keep it very limited. The FOMO around wanting to
Yeah.
get to that sort of event where it's like this is extremely exclusive.
Yeah.
The event space can only host 30 to 40 people max. Maybe there is a book that's related. Maybe they are an author. Maybe you do a custom book signing. And so that's kind of taking that major concept and making it more a little bit backyard thinking digestible.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
We were talking before we started recording here, and I asked the kind of the elephant in the room questions, like, so what defines a micro event? Like, what are we looking at number wise isn't important. And I was kind of half kidding, but I was like, yeah, 10 to 200, but Emily, you brought a great point. It's like, you think about myself or anybody being part of a large crowd. You feel maybe small, less comfortable. You don't have a voice. There's just a lot of people going on, right? Or sorry, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of people. But if you pull back that number to the point where there's a comfort level, and I think you mentioned, even at getting in the 50 range can feel like a lot, but
Yeah.
you've got to be mindful of the numbers of people that you're going to put in that room. But what happens, and you've already mentioned this as well, is just guard comes down, level of comfort goes up, conversations get real. I'm not necessarily just focused on like, well, I got to toe the company line. I got to say the right things here. Now I can, have real life conversations with the person sitting next to me. And that changes the flavor of not only the overall event, but like what I leave with is like my memory of like, I really connected with that person, that woman
Yeah.
who's in a similar job to me, struggling with some of the same things as me. So
Yeah. And
you,
it's all about creating those moments of connection, from concept to creation. I think that, when you think about your attendees first and you think about, how do I want them to feel the second they step in the door? And for me, how I want to feel whenever I step into a door is belonging, right? Like I want to feel like I have some sense of belonging, like I'm meant to be in that room. And so, it's really getting like intentional about even, okay, a lot of times you're looking at name tags, how are you even able to get like, oh, you're personalized, like with a hand printed name tag, like cool. Like that's not that level of personalization that we need to get. Like maybe at the check-in table, you have, a Lego station where they're creating their own figurines and they're able to, pick from like certain, elements that create their version of a marketer. And then at the end, maybe there's this group of people that all kind of have a similar Lego figurine. And there's that opportunity to connect on a really personal level, because not only is it like, oh, wow, like I feel seen and heard through this activity, but it's also this like tactile experience where there's been play involved and they've almost been able to like play with each other through creating that, whatever it may be. And so it just creates connection from the moment that they step in.
yeah. You know, as you're talking about this Lego figurines, I'm thinking like I'm going to build a little one that's wizard like, right? Because event people have magical powers, and that's going to take us back to also we started having this conversation, but you were mentioning this great example, right? So people are sitting there, they're forming opinions in their head, trying to picture like, okay, so what does this look like? You had a great example of a company called Lavender at a recent SaaStr, maybe it was a year or two ago, but they did kind
Yeah.
of a sidecar or a bolt-on event to this trade show, which is kind of in my world, right? At Blue Hive, we're focusing primarily on helping people on the trade show floor, but that show experience is so much larger than that, and it can be amazing to have those attachment events, the bolt-on pieces or whatever. So can you tell us a little bit about that Lavender concept, and then kind of in general, like how does a sidecar work with a larger event to get the maximum value out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, first I'll kind of share about the Lavender event. So yeah, it was a few years ago at SaaStr, and Lavender, they were an exhibitor, and they were, obviously like they were definitely a growing brand, trying to get their name out there a little bit more, trying to interact and engage with, attendees on that more personal, like one-on-one level. This event, it was a little bit larger because they were kind of looking at who's their audience, right? They were kind of primarily after tech attendees, people in the B2B SaaS space. They knew that the conference had a pretty high concentration of like Gen Z, millennials. So they really played into, who they were serving and what their attendees were. And so they actually, they ended up creating a sidecar event and had it one of the nights. And it was a wizard rave. So they actually, went in and rented out like this total bar space. They had, strobe lights, neon lights, everything that was branded, in all their colors. They had people that were walking on stilts. They had all this music. And kind of the aftermath was what was really interesting to see, is that how much social buzz was created out of that moment, right? You had attendees that were posting. You had, just general people who were like walking down the street, recording outside and being like, oh my gosh, look at this, this lady on stilts. And so it's just that kind of crazy moment. And it allows you to, get a different level of connection than you would on a show floor, right? Like on a show floor, you're hoping that whatever conference you go to, they have put some kind of parameters in place that, offer some type of, booth engagement, attendee engagement, some type of scavenger hunt, whatever it may be, some type of activation that drives traffic to your booth. But that's uncontrolled. You have no idea what is going to happen. And so, for me, when I look at trade shows and when I look at conferences, I really think about like, okay, like absolutely, I want to have my presence there, but maybe that's not where I'm putting my full focus. I think sometimes I'm kind of splitting that and saying, okay, well, is there an opportunity to really connect with a key group of people? And I'm talking like 15, 20 maybe.
Right.
And that's where I have the opportunity to really cherry pick the list. I can look at the people who I've been trying to get in contact with. I bring an experience that is totally different. A lot of times when you're looking at creating sidecar events outside of a main like major industry conference, you have to get really creative, right? So you can't just do a happy hour, you can't just do a dinner at any kind of steakhouse. You have to, really pick a space that has that draw, the attendee draw. Because I think that, there's so much that's going on, and a lot of times people want to rest also outside of a conference. So it's also like, even, I've seen a huge rise recently in places and in companies renting, wellness spaces, or, renting out just a little studio and creating like a wellness room. And so it gives attendees really like that moment to kind of step away and take care of themselves. So that's even an avenue that you could go when you're thinking about a sidecar event, is giving people an opportunity to rest.
Yeah, no, those are both great. I got 2 points that I'd love to kind of pick at a little bit. So one is turning or using a show as this kind of gathering spot for your company, because in the remote first world where so many people are scattered around the country or whatnot, or even around the world, this event that they're coming to anyways becomes kind of that's magnetic piece, right? So when you're thinking about, I've got the show, right? We're coming. We've rented the concrete. We got the booth. We're doing the activations. We've already agreed that we're going to spend the T&E. We're going to fly the people in and so forth. So how do we maximize the event? Doing a sidecar piece where we can really control the narrative is an amazing piece to kind of add on to that, right? And as much as it, pains me as the booth guy, but like when you look at your overall budget, do you maybe, like you were saying, do you think, well, I've got several $100,000 that we're allocating anyways. Do we peel back on one part of the spend in order to do something that's going to make the overall experience even better, right? Because I'm guessing that the lavender event that you described, you put that in, most shows are 3 days, right? You put that on night 1 or night 2, and you create all this buzz. There's a push and a pull, right? We're talking about it on the show floor. We're driving, more attention to what's happening off floor. And then that buzz that's created there pushes back to create more buzz on the show floor. So you're kind of creating this cool flywheel of energy.
Yeah.
And then,
and it really becomes that unified experience, right? Like, and I think that as you're talking about that, there's even ways that you can gamify it, right? Like you could create some sort of an activity, at the event, that where if they come back to, visit you at your booth, they get entered into a drawing or something like that. Or they get to, take place in some sort of like exclusive panel or, whatever it may be. But I think that there's definitely that way to keep that as like a full connection loop, and really maximize the ROI of being at an event and your investment in a trade show.
Let me pitch this to my co-host here, because I know that he's going to, absolutely die on this hill, but this is your bailiwick, right? It's like, if you're going to bring in a production crew like a Hamlin Creative and say, we're doing this booth, we're already here to capture the content on the show floor because we know we're going to use it in so many different ways. Right, Brendon, you've said this so many times, it's really ingrained in my mind. It's the most expensive video is the first video. Everything after that is like, it's gravy, right? Because you've already got the team there. You're already kind of engaging in the conversations, creating the narrative and creating the thought process around all the content we're going to create. You go ahead and add this additional component to your overall stay in said show city. You're not doubling your budget. You're actually adding a very small proportion to that, but your value is like exponentially growing.
Yeah.
And I think you're also, in that regard, when you separate, or when you kind of double your footprint, you're also able to kind of make them purpose built. And one is the delivery of the product, let's say, on the show floor, and the mechanics, the business of why you're there. And the other piece can be really the personality of that brand, which really is much more open, and it gives 2 touch points. And again, it goes back to what you're saying, Emily, this just the FOMO of it all. You could see that kind of generate more recall after the fact. And that's where we talk about, like, if you're capturing this stuff after spending all of this money and investing in this event, you can then be sharing that out, or leading up to your next event, if it's a multi-stage or next year, whatever it is, there's a lot of opportunities there. So I see this as a secondary way to just kind of continuing that brand message and pushing that out.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think that you'd be foolish not to bring in a production crew if you're doing, a sidecar event.
Yeah.
Whether it be to get, small customer testimonial videos, just general like kind of B-roll footage that you can leverage for your socials. A lot of times people want to see the real raw moments of what it looks like to interact with your brand. They don't want to see the like, you know, clean, crisp production, of like, here's my commercial and this is what we do. And, here we are and we're
Yeah.
XYZ agency. They want to be able to kind of get an, insider's view into kind of like that background noise. And so I think that this gives such a great opportunity. And then, also if you're not capturing the content that comes out of your events, why are you even hosting the event in the first place? That content has like is legs to run,
Yeah.
run with it.
Where's the thumbs up button? Where is that?
Keep hitting it.
The applause button. Where is that?
That's right, Sarah. That's your job on the other end. Yeah, awesome stuff. So we do have a question, and it's just really about, how can a person listen to this after the fact? So yes, this is a live show, but it gets recorded here on LinkedIn. It's also on our YouTube, and it will come out as a podcast. So right here at this very same link where you're watching us live, you'll be able to circle back and watch this in the future as well. So we're creating content. Look at what we're doing here, and then repurposing it in the future. All right. So Sarah says, say it again. All right. So we kind of alluded to this, but let's kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive. So scaling an event on every budget, right? We already kind of talked about like, boy, if you're going to do it, then it doesn't cost twice as much money to really do it right. And that kind of plays into that budgeting. And before, Emily, you jump in and kind of let us know your thoughts on it. What I'll say is what we're seeing on our end is when we're talking to our clients about creating this end-to-end experience, we're also reminding them that, like, listen, there's other buckets of money that live within whether they live in the marketing department or they live somewhere else within the company, but there's an ad budget, there's a social budget, there's a promotional budget, there's a sales budget, there's a recruitment budget. What the content that's being created at these events, how many different things can it benefit? Different vertical silos within the company, right? Go ask around, tell people what your thoughts are, plans are. All of a sudden they're like, well, hey, if you're going to do that, like take some of this budget right now. All of a sudden you just, increased your spend by $25,000 or whatever, because everybody is pitching in a little bit more. And now you're creating benefits that go across the org.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of that, across the board benefit, right? There's when you're really getting intentional and like kind of starting from step one and really getting clear about your goals, right? I think that getting clear and getting aligned with your team. I think that you can push on an event and your team can be like, oh, cool, whatever. But I think that whenever you have the buy-in and there's the alignment and they feel excited, it just makes the impact 10 times, greater. And I think that that's where, like you said, you can really understand like what are your needs and how can this event help your team with content that could come out of it. And so that's definitely something that I do whenever I think about events is I talk to our teams and I'm like, hey, what's kind of our content calendar? What are our, big rocks for the year? And how can I align everything that we do back to those overarching goals? And I think that the truth is that, a big budget doesn't equal big impact. I think that you could have all the dollars in the world to spend, but I think that if your strategy and your intention isn't in the right place, then you're just burning dollars, right? You can, I think, first start with two questions. So like, why are we hosting this event? And then how do we want people to feel when they leave?
All excellent questions. So from a scaling events, you pretty much, rolled that out. It's not necessarily about the budget. So how do you get bigger impact from small scale events? Any specific examples, or just a general kind of overarching thought process that you utilize?
Yeah, so I think that it's really about like focusing on the small thoughtful details, right? So, when you think about the experience, are you thinking about, that personalized handwritten note? Are you thinking about, the room of 500 people who would barely remember you? Or are you thinking about the 15 that are going to be raving after the event? So it's really thinking about, the experience as a whole, right? So going back and saying, okay, I've got, $15,000 to spend on this event. My goals are thought leadership, and I want to bring in a expert speaker, and kind of create this experience. And so I think that when you think about that, in tandem, you want to look at, what is the environment that I want to create for this experience, right? So it's saying, I don't need to necessarily deliver this content to a group of 200, as long as the people that are in the room are the people that matter the most. And it's really about just getting intentional about that. I think, did that answer the question? I don't know. I feel like I kind of went on a ramble there.
Yeah, like anything else, you start with the right questions about like, what are the goals? What are we really trying to accomplish here? Because like you said, all the money in the world doesn't fix anything if you don't really know what you're aiming at, right? You just
Yeah.
throwing a
Yeah.
bunch of shit against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Strategery, absolutely. So back to you, Brendan. We're going to maybe get into, so we're about halfway through here. We're at the 30-minute mark. I know Emily's got a playbook for micro.
Yeah, some a visual aid. So can you share with us a little bit about share this playbook visually, and then talk a little bit about how you would design a micro event? What are some of the, tent poles of doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will have a visual to share for those who are watching live, but then I will also talk through this for those who can't see, and definitely want to follow along. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And if you can see my screen, give me a thumbs up. All right, we're
Nice.
Yeah,
good.
we're good.
Awesome. So, really, I think that I've kind of broken down this micro event playbook into 4 steps. So I have, our first step is define the goal. I've kind of talked about this throughout the show so far, and I think that any great event really starts with clarity, right? So the foundation of the successful planning really lies in understanding the core business objectives. So if your company is, suffering for pipeline, you're not going to go out and create, thought leadership events. You're really going to want to create pipeline focused, pipeline generating focused events. So it's really about, what is the bucket that you want to fall under? And I think that there's kind of the 3 big ones. There's, generating pipeline, there's strengthening relationships, and then there's thought leadership. So I think that the event design should really reflect that goal completely. So, at a customer appreciation event, that should feel totally different than a high intensity, demand generation dinner. And I think that, that objective really shapes every single decision. It shapes every single touch point. It shapes where you're, selecting your venue, what city you're going to be in, what the experience is going to be. Are you going to actually have like a panel? Are you going to bring in a speaker? Are you going to have interactivity moments? And so all that really goes back into the overarching goal. I think step 2 is about curating the guest list. So I think that, the guest list is everything. If you're hosting a dinner party, I'm not going to just like post something on Nextdoor and be like, hey, dinner party at my house, come join me for braised beef ribs. No, I'm gonna reach out to the people that I know the best to curate that space. I want to invite the people who bring energy, who bring ideas, that actually bring genuine connection to the experience. And so I think, there's three things to consider. Quality over quantity, right? So I think that, a carefully curated list is really like absolutely more powerful than 200 people that you'll never speak to again, that are just kind of coming in for the experience. The strategic selection. Whoop. There we go. The strategic selection. So, you want to choose attendees that align with your event goals. So, and actually can contribute to the conversation. So you're not going to invite people who are, kind of like more fly on the walls than actual conversation contributors. If you're having a roundtable, right? That's not going to be a very good roundtable. You're not going to get a lot of conversation. And then, the last thing is the energy consideration. So I think that, you definitely want to bring people in that have that positive energy, fresh perspectives, and genuine interest in engaging with others. I think that one of the biggest things that we face now in the event space is actually trying to get people out to interact. But for me, I'm really focused on like finding the people who are already interested in interacting rather than trying to convince them to come out for this reason, for this benefit, that, oh, you're going to miss this XYZ. Like, if you're not wanting to interact, I'll find another way to have that touch point. But that may not be the person that I want in my, carefully curated room. And I think that pro tip is kind of consider the group dynamics. So I think, industry veterans, emerging leaders, bring in some introverts, extroverts. Just because you're an introvert doesn't mean that you don't want to engage in a community setting. And I think that when you have like a dynamic group, it creates that natural conversation catalyst. The third step, I'll pause if you guys have any questions.
No, this is great. I mean, we talk a lot of theory on the pod, but to see the actual tactical steps of like, okay, this sounds great. How do I actually get started? How do I go about it? So I think it's awesome. And just so everybody knows, this will be available. We'll put it in the show notes, but we can totally share this, and we'll let you know how to do that once we kind of wrap up the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally available as the download if you want to have access to it. Free, open, no worries at all. It is here for you. So I think, the kind of third step that I like to focus on is mapping the attendee journey. So, the events aren't just about like all the pre-planning and about what happens in the room. I think that the experience starts the moment that someone receives their invite. So like that pre-event invitation, that sets the tone, that makes it personal, not just transactional. I think crafting the messaging that really creates the anticipation and clearly communicates value. I think a lot of times, especially with our favorite friend, ChatGPT, however you want to say it, there's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of this, and I've seen it come across my inbox for event invitations, and it's all these great, interesting, word salad, but I don't actually understand why I should be attending or what the valuable takeaway is going to be.
Yeah.
So I think it's like really creating the anticipation, but also clearly communicating the value. And Sarah, I see a question. How long does it typically take to plan one of my events? It really depends. So it depends on what the goal is. I would say, really from idea, I take around 3 months, for like these smaller kind of micro events, to kind of get the idea and then to fully plan it out through execution. So it is kind of a longer process, but it's just because I like to be really intentional and partner with different stakeholders in my company, to make sure that we're, all working together to hit the goals that we have outlined. So
Emily,
yeah.
can I just also add on that if you're doing a sidecar event at a large, trade show or conference, there's lots of other companies who are thinking the same thing. There's only so many venues that might fit the bill, right? So if you get within 3 months of this, of a large conference in a certain city, like that's not enough time either, right? So it's
Exactly.
obviously contextual, right? If you're tagging this along on something that people are planning for a year ahead of time, you're going to need to get out in front of that, with the actual securing of the venue and so forth, well ahead of that.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, definitely great call out. Because when I say 3 months, I'm talking about if that's just an owned and not outside of an industry conference. I think that if you're talking about, doing a sidecar event outside of an industry conference, that planning needs to start the second that you sign your contract for your industry conference. Honestly, you need to be thinking about, all those different kind of, pieces, parts, as you're going through the whole planning process, because I think that it unifies the experience when you do them in tandem.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Second thing, on-site experience. So, I think that it should really feel intentional and not chaotic. So, every touch point from the registration to the departure should really reinforce the purpose. So that's kind of what I was talking about earlier is, the second that somebody walks in the door, it's not just, generic name tags. It's, maybe creating an intentional moment for like play and connection through the check-in process. And then there's that, big looming thing of the post-event follow-up. So, events should feel like a continuation of the conversation and not a cold pitch. So I think that, a lot of times there's, and this is really where it gets to, the alignment between sales and marketing and making sure that your sales team knows how to handle contacts post-event or for post-event follow-up or however that is, structured within your organization. I think that's just about the alignment there, right? So you want to make sure that post-event attendees are getting a message that feels organic and feels like that natural continuation of the conversation and not this like, oh, hey, you attended our event and now here's, this pitch about who we are and what we do and here's how we can help you. So I think that, when you're able to reference, specific moments through that were made throughout the event, it just strengthens that connection a little bit more between that prospect and, the respective account director, SDR, whatever it may be that is kind of handing off that process. I think that a kind of final word here is that, I think that really when it's seen between the transitions between the formal moments, I think that those organic conversations that emerge throughout those times, that's what really makes people feel comfortable and engaged. So, if you're thinking about, a wraparound event outside of a major industry trade show, maybe there's some type of, transfer from the trade show to the event where it's that touch point, where it's kind of that pre-moment where you're allowing that comfort and kind of the walls to start breaking down after they've been in such an on setting. So that really depends on your budget as well. Kind of the fourth part that I like to really focus on is play and delight. So, play breaks down walls. I think that when people laugh or they're experiencing joy, they open up. There's the psychological, studies. There's all the benefits that come from laughing and like just kind of seeing the world through a lens of joy. And I think that that's when the natural conversations and relationships begin to form, is when you're laughing together, when you're kind of in that backyard party setting. So, it's not cheesy gimmicks. It means, weaving in really unexpected, delightful moments that create memorable experiences and genuine connections. So you could do, a people scavenger hunt for your attendees. You could have a secret menu experience, or you could even, weave in meaningful icebreakers from the start. So those are kind of three things that I like to do whenever I'm thinking about how can I add play to any kind of event, because that's definitely a big, I think, emerging theme as we're, going into 2026 and wrapping out 2025 is, I think people are craving more moments to kind of get a little bit more childlike. And so then the fifth part is, measure what matters. So, I think that too often we judge events by attendance numbers alone. And I think that, while the head count matters, and especially when you're talking micro events, you don't want to have only 5 people show up, but you can still make it a great experience if that happens. I think that the real success lies in the quality of the interactions and the lasting impact of the relationship. So I think, 15 quality connections and meaningful conversations matter more than the total number of attendees. And I think that when you look at like kind of post-event statistics, you're looking at, okay, well, maybe I just want, 1 or 2 or 3 follow-up meetings after the event. I don't need, 20, 30 follow-up meetings after the event. And when you're looking at these follow-up meetings, it's with prospects that you've already curated the list, you already know who they are. And so that meeting is going to be that much more impactful because you've already kind of done the pre-work. And so I have some key success indicators that I always, have top of mind when I'm thinking post-event is, did attendees walk away feeling inspired and connected? Did the event spark follow-up meetings and deeper relationships? And even if it's not a follow-up meeting with myself, was I able to connect 2 other people and, bring a new relationship together? And then that just creates so much more brand recall, because maybe you haven't helped them in something where you can necessarily directly help them with something in your company, but you've connected them with somebody else that can help them with an immediate need. And then whenever they do have a need where you can service, your name kind of automatically comes up. Are people still thinking about the experience weeks later? And then, I think the most important thing is, did you achieve your original goal from step 1? So, did you generate pipeline? Did you improve your experience? Or did you, create some thought leadership? So with that, that's kind of my 5-step playbook. Very high level. I think that a lot of this is things that a lot of field marketers already know, but can get easily forgotten.
Yeah, no, that's a great little roadmap and just reminder of like, here are really the important pieces. And there's room to plug a lot of the things that we've already talked about into all of those pieces, specifically like that content creation, the content capture, and all those pieces will, kind of play
One
in
quick
together.
question. Do you ever adapt any of that philosophy to virtual? Does that ever come into your planning?
Yeah, definitely. So, I think that it depends on what the setting is, right? So, I mean, when you're thinking about virtual, are you doing a round table? Are you doing, a smaller keynote, fireside chat type of thing? Are you doing a, digital, deal acceleration event? So I think that it really depends on what the format is. But yeah, I think that this philosophy definitely carries over into digital, because at the end of the day, you're thinking about companies. A lot of companies, when you're thinking about budgets, a lot of field marketers in general, they don't have, even $100,000 a year to spend, I mean, it really depends on what you're looking at. And so I think that it's about figuring out how you can meet your attendees and meet your audience and still create an authentic moment for them to connect, even if it's virtual. I think
Yeah.
that if it's virtual, it's leaning a lot more on the experience while still being able to kind of reinforce your brand messaging throughout, but not like leading with your brand messaging.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just curious because it's, there's obviously we're driving towards in person and in real life, and we really want to see that flourish. But there is that in between where, a virtual used to be everything everybody was doing, and now it's sort of secondary, but it still can be impactful. I went to a meeting yesterday with like 50 people, maybe 80 people. And then they broke us out 2 to 3 people into these breakout rooms for 10-minute, one-on-one, one-on-two. And it was really effective, I thought. But it was small. And it was quick, and I think we might've gotten a job out of it. So it's weird.
And guess what? Those breakout rooms, like those were intentionally set. They weren't just randomized. There was somebody who was looking at your name, your title, your background, your experience, and like curating you with those other 2 or 3 people for that breakout space. And so I think that's what I'm talking about when you're thinking about attendees is that level of, kind of personalization and intention that goes into the planning.
Yeah, I love that. Yep.
Nice. Hey, we're at 50 minutes, and we here on the Toolbox, we try to cap it off within an hour or so. So I think we've done great. You got through the presentation of your playbook, which is wonderful. Once again, I think everybody out there who's either hearing this after the fact or have seen this, you can drop something into the comments, or go ahead and feel free to send either 3 of us a note. We'll make sure and get it from Emily, but just reach out and say, hey, we'd love to get our hands on that playbook. So as we do here in the Toolbox, we like to kind of cap it off with a question for you and kind of put a bow on things. So Emily, if you had kind of a couple, 2 or 3 kind of top tips that really kind of stick out, maybe it's something that you've already talked about, we could circle back to, or maybe it's something new to introduce, what can you leave our listeners, our attendees with, that they'd be able to maybe put into action or take and make their own right away?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you're feeling overwhelmed by event marketing or events as a concept in general, and you don't even know where to start, I think my advice is, start small. Be intentional and focus on creating moments, not just meetings. I think that small is powerful, right? Micro moments create these massive ripple effects, like was clearly seen with the lavender wizard rave. If you go and like search that on social, I'm sure that something will pop up and you'll see just all these recap videos. So there is definitely that like ripple effect outside of it. The second thing is lead with humanity. So I think people crave connection and not just more content. So I think that especially in a realm of digital, in a realm where we are all isolated, probably some working in siloed teams, some not having a team office space, a lot of us are in remote and distributed teams. Really we're craving those moments of connection, of being able to be in person. If it's not in person, being able to connect digitally in a kind of no walls type of setting. And then I think that the third thing is that play really matters. So I think that when you think about events through the lens of whimsy, whimsy is what keeps people engaged and energized. And I think that events are truly like they are one of the last truly human focused for marketing channels. And so I think that, when you strip away the noise and focus on the connection, you don't just stand out, but you make people really feel like they belong. And so I think that that's really what I try to focus on whenever I'm building any kind of event, whether it be digital, whether it be an owned event or a wraparound sidecar event. I really want to make people feel like they belong. And so I think that that's my advice that I would leave you with.
I love the last part. I mean, you don't have to look very far. The world's tough right now, right? There's a lot of a lot of crap. There's a lot of sadness, and like, how can we bring joy and create those moments, right? And that leaves impact. Somebody's in a crummy mood and walks into this event, and you flip that on its head, and they leave feeling really good about everything. And granted, we're not whitewashing over all the things, but we can control what we can control, right? So we can control what we do with these events, and the goal being, we want people to leave with a great, memorable experience, and not only think positively about our brand, but about have them feeling great about, like, I just made a great connection. I just learned a bunch of stuff. Now I'm excited, and now I become a brand evangelist, and I'm all about promoting what their mission is.
Yeah,
exactly.
Excellent. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. We're right at about 55 minutes. This is a perfect time to kind of put a bow on it. So I've already mentioned it with regards to reaching out to Emily, but Emily, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, definitely. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a friend request, shoot me a DM. I will definitely be sure to get back with you in, I would say at least 3 business days. So yeah, no, definitely. Find me on LinkedIn. I'll connect. Happy to connect with anyone that wants to connect. I tend to post a lot of things about field marketing. A lot of it can be nonsense sometimes. So I like to
nonsense.
We didn't even touch on your gator wrangling.
Exactly.
Well, you are from Florida, so I mean, you get that.
I am from Florida. I did get asked if I worked at an alligator farm at the so
it's fair.
Yeah. And I have traded paintings for a car. So I mean, if you want to learn more, then follow on LinkedIn.
There you go. Actually, before we totally cap it off, you do a thing. It's like an online roundtable. It's called Beyond the Booth. What's a little plug for that? Like, what are you doing, and what kind of community are you building around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Beyond the Booth, it kind of is a connection for field marketers, event marketers who are doing events. So we all just kind of come together each month. We try to do it each month. It's, I think, the first Wednesday of each month. I post the registration link. And it's really just coming together, shooting the stuff, and, getting down to the nitty-gritty about, what's working. A lot of times event professionals are working in small teams. And so this is really just an opportunity for those of us who are in small teams to come together and feel like we kind of have a bigger team.
That's really cool. Now, did you and some of your colleagues or associates basically you were sitting around shooting the shit? I'm going to say it. It's my show. I can say shit. Did you just kind of come up with this one day and say, you know what, like, we're having these wonderful conversations, but we're doing it in a vacuum. Why don't we involve more people and get more ideas? Is that a little bit of how it was born?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually, and I will plug Pam. So Pamela Strug, she is a good friend, and actually kind of put the thought in my ear and was like, you post so much about events, and you're giving, good, nuggets of truth and wisdom, and we can all learn from each other. Like, we need to get a little meetup together. And so I kind of took the charge and said, all right, I'll get it together. And it's just, here we are now.
And it was born. Yeah, awesome.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, that's so cool. This is one there's many things that are really cool about this digital platform that we're using, and the community that it creates. And I'll just, before we, totally tap out, I appreciate both of you guys. It's only because of LinkedIn that I know you both. And Brendon and I, we're putting it out there. We're having a meetup. We're having a beer summit in Asheville.
IRL.
In real life over the Halloween weekend. I've wanted to go to Asheville for a number of years. And obviously you guys are still in recovery mode after the devastating hurricane that kind of went through almost about a year ago right now. Right. So I'm really looking forward to meeting you in real life. Big hug for you and
Yeah.
and Sarah. We're going to check out a bunch of breweries. We're going to see Asheville, and I'm looking forward to that process, and just expanding what we have together here online into the real world. So
yeah,
I'm super excited about
great. Can't wait.
Yeah. Right on. So feel free to get involved and be part of Emily's group, the Beyond the Booth. And if you want to come to Asheville on that weekend, let's do that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, here.
Thanks, y'all.
I'm inviting everybody to Brendan's house.
Yeah, right. Sarah,
backyard. Hey,
get ready.
we just talked about backyard micro events. Who knows how many people might show up?
It's in my yard.
Exactly.
Awesome.
I can help sell it.
Guys, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody's time. Emily, thanks for joining us. You've been a wonderful ray of sunshine. You've had some great experiences to share and examples, and another good episode here in the Toolbox. So thanks so much.
Thanks,
everybody.
Emily.
Have a great rest of your week. Happy eventing, and take care of yourselves. Take care.